My name is Leah Anderson. I was 34 years old when my grandfather died and left my family almost $12 million. My mother got his lake house and a large investment account. My older sister Natalie got 2 rental properties. My uncle Richard was supposed to take control of Anderson Building Supply, the company Grandpa had spent 46 years building. Then the estate attorney reached my name. He pushed a yellow envelope across the table. Nothing else. Natalie looked at it and laughed. Richard leaned back in his chair and said, Grandpa had always understood who could handle real responsibility. My mother touched my wrist. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Leah. I hadn't said a word. That was the strange part. They were comforting themselves before I had even reacted. I opened the envelope. Inside was a piece of paper in Grandpa's handwriting. No goodbye, no explanation, only a phone number. Underneath it were 5 words. Call before they sell everything. I read the sentence twice. Then I looked toward the attorney. He was watching me. I started to ask what the note meant. He gave me the smallest shake of his head. Not here. My family didn't notice. They were already discussing renovations, property values, and how quickly Richard could restructure the company. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're enjoying this story so far, please take a second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It truly helps this channel reach more people who love emotional family stories like these. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in her place? I'm curious to read your thoughts. I waited until I reached the parking garage. Then I called. A woman answered on the second ring. I told her my name. She went completely silent. Then she asked whether the will had already been read. I said yes. Her next question was stranger. Has Richard mentioned selling the original warehouse? I looked back toward the building. 20 minutes earlier, Richard had been telling Natalie that a developer was interested in exactly that property. I asked who she was. Her name was Evelyn Price. She had managed several of Grandpa's private financial accounts for more than a decade. Then she told me not to sign anything my family gave me. I almost laughed. Why would they need my signature? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. Because your grandfather didn't leave you nothing, Leah. He left you the one thing your family needs before they can touch the biggest part of their inheritance. And according to his instructions, none of them were supposed to know you had it until they showed you exactly what they planned to do. The next morning, I met Evelyn in a small accounting office 20 minutes outside downtown. She was in her late 50s, with short gray hair and the kind of calm voice that made me lower mine without realizing it. 3 folders were waiting on the conference table. Before touching them, Evelyn asked me something unexpected. What do you think your family believes about you? I almost smiled. That didn't require much thought. That I quit college. That I never became anything impressive. That Grandpa kept giving me chances because he felt sorry for me. Did he? No. That answer came faster. After my father died when I was 19, I lasted 3 more semesters in college before coming home. I wasn't failing because I was stupid. I was grieving and pretending I wasn't. My mother saw only the unfinished degree. Natalie saw proof that she had become the successful daughter. Grandpa saw someone who needed time. He gave me a temporary job at Anderson Building Supply. Temporary became 4 years. I started by answering phones and filing invoices. Later, I handled vendor accounts, inventory records, and purchase orders. That was where I first learned something about Richard. He liked money more than details. Once, he told me to approve an invoice that was almost $18,000 higher than the purchase order. I refused. He asked whether dropping out of college had somehow made me an accountant. I showed Grandpa. The invoice was corrected. A week later, Grandpa took me to lunch. He told me people revealed themselves around money. Then he told me to remember what I had seen. Richard never forgave me for that. When I eventually left Grandpa's company for an office management job at a small architectural firm, my family treated it as another failure. I didn't. For the first time, my paycheck wasn't connected to my last name. I rented a modest apartment, drove an old Honda, saved what I could. Grandpa and I became closer after I stopped working for him. Every Sunday, I brought him coffee. We talked about work, books, neighborhood gossip, and sometimes my father. We never discussed inheritance. That was why the yellow envelope had shocked me. Evelyn opened the first folder. Your grandfather began changing his estate plan 3 years ago. She showed me financial records from Anderson Building Supply. The company was profitable. The original warehouse alone sat on land worth millions. Richard wanted to sell it. Grandpa repeatedly refused. Why? Because the warehouse still made money. It employed 43 people, and part of the property supported a vocational training program your grandfather funded. I knew the small training building behind the warehouse, but I had never understood how it was financed. Evelyn showed me the numbers. Selling the land would shut the program down unless someone paid to relocate it. Richard had no relocation plan. He did have a buyer, Northline Development. They had approached him while Grandpa was still alive. That caught me. Grandpa knew? Yes. And said no? Repeatedly. Then Evelyn showed me an email Richard had sent Natalie 6 months earlier. It was short. Once Dad is gone, we move quickly. Leah can't complicate this if she doesn't know. I read it again. Why was my name there? Evelyn opened the second folder. 9 years earlier, Grandpa had reorganized part of the company. He created a small class of protected shares, connected to 3 properties he considered essential to the business. The original warehouse was one of them. The shares didn't pay dividends. They couldn't be sold. They gave their holder almost no authority over daily operations. Except for one thing. A legacy property couldn't be sold without that person's consent. I felt something tighten in my chest. Who has them? Evelyn looked at me. You do. I actually laughed. It sounded too absurd. I owned no company stock. I had never received a certificate. I had never attended a shareholder meeting. Evelyn explained that Grandpa had placed the shares in a holding arrangement for me while retaining administrative control during his lifetime. He had deliberately kept them quiet. Why? Because he didn't want anyone pressuring you to surrender them. I thought about Richard, then Natalie, then the email. They knew. Evelyn nodded. They discovered enough to know you could block the warehouse sale. Your grandfather learned they were investigating the ownership structure last year. I stared at the papers. Yesterday, Natalie had laughed because I received nothing. She knew I controlled the one signature Richard needed. Why pretend otherwise? Because they don't know that you know. That was Grandpa's plan. I didn't like the word plan. It made him sound as though he had arranged a game after his death. Evelyn seemed to understand. Your grandfather didn't create their choices, Leah. He simply refused to protect them from those choices. She opened the final folder. Inside was the Northline offer. $10.1 million. I frowned. Richard had mentioned $8 million at the will reading. Evelyn turned the page. The later offer was $8.4 million. What happened to the difference? That's what your grandfather wanted to know. The buyer had reduced the direct purchase price after negotiating separate arrangements connected to Richard and Natalie. Richard was due a personal advisory payment if the sale closed. Natalie had negotiated a consulting contract. Together, they stood to receive more than $500,000 outside the money paid to Anderson Building Supply. Were those payments illegal? Not necessarily. Were they disclosed to Grandpa? No. That was the problem. They had asked Grandpa to approve a lower sale price without telling him they would personally benefit. He refused. Then Richard tried to persuade him to remove the protections around the warehouse. Grandpa refused that too. 6 weeks before his death, he stripped Richard of several financial permissions inside the company. Nobody told me. Nobody told Mom either. Evelyn hesitated. Your mother knew there had been an argument. I don't know how much Richard told her. I thought about Mom at the will reading. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The sentence sounded different now. My phone vibrated. Natalie. A message appeared. Mom's house tonight at 7. Richard needs everyone there to discuss the warehouse offer. A second message arrived. Please don't turn this into one of your principles. I showed Evelyn. She read it once. Then she pushed the folders aside. Go. And say what? Very little. I hated that answer. Evelyn explained that Grandpa's trust contained a 30-day review period before Richard could assume full control of the company. If he respected the restrictions, disclosed his financial interests, and handled the transition properly, the inheritance would proceed. If he deliberately tried to bypass those restrictions, the trustee could intervene. So Grandpa was testing him. No. Evelyn shook her head. Richard already knew the rules. Your grandfather simply made sure the rules still mattered after he died. That evening, I arrived at Mom's house at 7. Richard had documents waiting. Natalie had her laptop open. Mom had poured wine. Richard gave me the kind of smile people use when they expect an easy yes. He explained that Northline wanted to move quickly, $8.4 million. The warehouse was old. The land was more valuable than the building. The family would be foolish to wait. Then he pushed a document toward me. I read the first page. It was a consent form. My name was already printed beneath the signature line. I looked at Richard. "Why do you need me to sign this?" He barely paused. "Old paperwork. Grandpa attached your name to some shares years ago. It doesn't mean anything." Natalie smiled. "It's basically a technicality." I turned another page. The document didn't only approve the warehouse sale. It surrendered my approval rights over all 3 protected properties. Permanently. I looked at my mother. "Did you read this?" She frowned. "Richard said it's standard." I turned back to him. "If my shares mean nothing, why do you need me to surrender them?" Nobody answered. For the first time, Natalie stopped smiling. Richard leaned forward. "Don't make a business decision you don't understand." That sentence would have worked on me once. Maybe even a week earlier. I closed the folder. "Then help me understand it." I asked for Northline's original offer. Richard said it wasn't relevant. I asked whether he would personally receive money if the sale closed. His face changed. Just slightly, but enough. Mom looked between us. "What is she talking about?" Richard ignored her. I turned to Natalie. "How much is your consulting agreement worth?" Her laptop snapped shut. Mom stared at her. "What consulting agreement?" Silence filled the room. And suddenly I understood something Grandpa must have understood before me. Their plan only worked while each person knew a different version of the truth. I stood. Richard asked where I was going. "Home." He pointed at the consent form. "You need to sign that." "No." His voice hardened. "Leah, this isn't the time to prove something." I picked up my purse. "I'm not proving anything." Then I looked at the 3 of them. "I'm just not signing away something you spent months making sure I didn't know I had." Natalie's face went pale. That was how I knew. She hadn't merely suspected. She knew exactly what Grandpa had given me. And judging by the way Richard slowly removed his hand from the folder, so did he. I didn't hear from Richard the next morning. That worried me more than another argument would have. At 11, Evelyn called. Richard had submitted the Northline sale directly to Daniel Mercer, Grandpa's trustee. He claimed I was refusing consent because I was angry about the inheritance. He also claimed I didn't understand the financial consequences of delaying the sale. There was one problem. He hadn't disclosed his advisory payment, or Natalie's consulting agreement. Daniel scheduled a meeting for the following morning. I spent that night with Evelyn reviewing documents, not hundreds, only the ones that mattered. Grandpa's restrictions, the original $10.1 million offer, the reduced $8.4 million agreement, Richard's payment, Natalie's contract, and the consent form they had tried to make me sign. For once, I didn't need to know everything. I only needed to know enough. The meeting started at 9. Richard arrived with an attorney. Natalie came with him. Mom sat between us looking exhausted. Daniel began with one question. Did everyone in this room know Leah's approval was required before the warehouse could be sold? Richard said the structure was complicated. Daniel repeated the question. Natalie looked down. Richard finally said yes. Mom turned toward him. You told me her signature was just a technicality. Richard ignored her. Daniel placed the original Northline offer on the screen. $10.1 million. Then the final offer. 8.4. Mom stared at the numbers. Why did it go down? Nobody answered. Daniel displayed Richard's advisory agreement. $250,000 payable after closing. Then Natalie's consulting agreement. $375,000. Mom looked at Natalie. You never told me. Natalie became defensive. It was legitimate work. Maybe it was. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that both of them had pushed Grandpa to accept a lower price, while hiding payments they would personally receive. Richard's attorney argued that the agreements were separate. Daniel asked why they had not been disclosed. Silence. Then he showed an email Richard had sent Northline. Keep personal compensation outside the Anderson materials until approval is secured. That ended the argument. Mom stood abruptly. You told me Dad was being unreasonable. Richard looked at her. He was. You told me this sale was about saving the company. It is? No. Her voice shook. It's about saving you. Richard went still. I knew immediately that Mom knew about his financial problems. Daniel did too. Grandpa had documented them. Richard had personally guaranteed loans connected to a failed real estate investment. If those debts were called, he could owe more than $3 million. The warehouse sale had become his escape route. That didn't make him a monster. It made him desperate. But desperation didn't give him the right to sacrifice everyone else's interests. Richard looked at me. You have no idea what it feels like to have everything you built about to disappear. I almost answered angrily. Then I realized something. He was right about one thing. I didn't know. But 43 warehouse employees didn't deserve to pay for his mistake either. Neither did the training program Grandpa funded. I told him that. Richard laughed bitterly. So now you're protecting Dad's legacy? No. I looked at Daniel. I'm protecting a profitable company from being forced into a bad deal because one person needs cash. That was the first moment Richard stopped treating me like his niece. He looked at me like an obstacle. Maybe that was progress. Daniel moved to the consent form. It didn't merely authorize the warehouse sale. It permanently removed my approval rights over all protected properties. He asked Richard why. Richard said the old structure made future transactions inefficient. Then Daniel produced another document. Grandpa had required Richard and Natalie to acknowledge my protected shares 8 months earlier. Both signatures were there. They hadn't discovered my rights after his death. They had known. Natalie looked at me. I wanted to tell you. When? She didn't answer. I asked again. When were you going to tell me? She looked away. That answer was enough. Daniel announced the trustees' decision. The North Line sale was rejected. Richard's right to assume control of Anderson Building Supply was suspended because he had attempted to complete a restricted transaction while concealing his financial interest. Natalie's distribution from the business trust was also suspended pending review. My mother's lake house and personal inheritance were unaffected. She had made a terrible choice by supporting Richard without asking enough questions. But she had not hidden money or filed false documents. There was a difference between weakness and fraud. Grandpa's trust recognized it. So did I. Richard stood. You can't take my company away because of one deal, Daniel corrected him. It isn't your company. Richard looked at me. Then who gets it? Nobody answered immediately. Daniel opened Grandpa's final succession instruction. If Richard lost management eligibility, the company would not pass directly to another family member. Instead, voting control would move into a stewardship trust. An independent executive would run daily operations. Major asset sales would require trustee approval. The protected properties would remain protected. And one family representative would sit on the stewardship board. Grandpa had named me. Natalie laughed once. Of course he did. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Richard asked if I had planned this with Grandpa. No. Did I want his job? No. Did I want his money? No. Then why was I doing this? That question was easier than he expected. Because you asked me to sign something you knew would hurt the company, and you expected me to do it because you spent years convincing me I wasn't smart enough to question you. Nobody spoke. Richard looked away first. Daniel asked whether I accepted the position. I hesitated. That mattered to me. I didn't want to become the opposite version of Richard. Someone who grabbed power simply because it was available. So I asked what the role actually required. 4 board meetings each year, review of major transactions, oversight of the vocational foundation, no authority over normal daily operations, no executive title, no corner office, no pretending I knew things I didn't. That sounded like something I could do. I accepted. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Natalie left without speaking to me. Richard stayed behind with his attorney. Mom followed me into the hallway. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, just stripped of certainty. I expected an apology. Instead, she asked why I hadn't told her about Grandpa's shares. I stared at her. I found out 2 days ago, she blinked. 2 days? Yes. Something changed in her face. For the first time, she understood that I hadn't been sitting on a secret fortune. I had walked into this as blind as everyone else. She whispered that she had thought I was trying to punish them. I shook my head. Mom, I spent half my life trying not to upset any of you. Then I said something I had never admitted aloud. That was part of the problem. She started crying. I didn't hug her, not because I wanted to hurt her, because comforting her immediately would have returned us to the same roles. She made the mistake. I absorbed the pain. Then I made her feel better, not this time. She asked what happened now. I looked through the glass wall at Richard sitting beside his attorney. Now everyone lives with what they chose. That afternoon, Daniel gave me one final envelope from Grandpa. Unlike the first one, it had my name written across the front. Inside was one page. Grandpa wrote that if I was reading it, I had accepted responsibility I never asked for. Then came the line that finally made me cry. He wrote that he had never been worried I would misuse money. He had been worried the family had spent so many years calling me incapable that eventually I would believe them. At the bottom was one final instruction. Don't become me. I read it 3 times. Then I understood. Grandpa hadn't chosen me to preserve everything exactly as he left it. He wanted me to make my own decisions. And for the first time in my life, I was going to. The review took 6 weeks, not 6 dramatic weeks. There were no secret accounts discovered at midnight, no surprise witnesses, no final hidden conspiracy waiting inside another folder. There didn't need to be. What Richard and Natalie had already done was enough. The independent review confirmed that Anderson Building Supply was financially healthy. The warehouse was profitable, and selling it was not necessary to protect the company. Richard had pushed the sale because he needed money. That choice cost him control. He kept the personal assets Grandpa had left him outside the business trust, but he never became president of Anderson Building Supply. His suspended business distribution was reduced under the trust terms, and the advisory payment from Northline disappeared when the sale collapsed. He eventually sold his interest in the failed real estate project and negotiated his debts. It hurt him financially. It didn't destroy him. That mattered to me. I didn't want Richard ruined. I wanted him to stop using the family business to rescue himself. Natalie's consequences were simpler. Her consulting contract vanished with the Northline deal. Her 2 rental properties remained hers, but the additional distribution connected to the business trust was reduced after the review confirmed that she had knowingly helped conceal her financial interest. She called me once after the decision. Not to apologize. Not exactly. She asked whether I was happy. I knew what she meant. Was I happy she had lost money? Was I happy Richard had lost the company? Was I finally enjoying being the successful sister? No, I wasn't. I told her that. Then I asked whether she understood why I had refused to sign. She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said she understood why Grandpa had chosen me. That wasn't the apology I had wanted, but it was probably the most honest thing she could give me then. Our relationship didn't magically heal. We started with distance. Sometimes distance is healthier than forgiveness performed too quickly. Mom was harder. 3 weeks after the review ended, she came to my apartment. She had never liked my apartment. Too small, too old, not enough natural light. That afternoon she walked inside and didn't criticize anything. I made coffee. She sat at my kitchen table. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she said she had spent years believing Natalie was secure because she had a degree, a large house, and a career she could explain proudly to other people. She believed Richard was capable because he spoke with confidence and wore expensive suits. And she believed I needed protecting because my life had gone off the path she had imagined for me. I asked her why protecting me had always sounded so much like disrespecting me. She looked down at her coffee. I don't know. I did. Fear. After Dad died, Mom became terrified of uncertainty. She had turned success into a formula. Education, career, property, money. Follow the formula and nothing terrible could happen. My life challenged that belief, so she kept trying to correct me. The painful part was realizing she had convinced herself she was doing it out of love. She apologized. Not perfectly. There were explanations mixed into it, defenses, old habits. But eventually she said the sentence I needed. I treated you like the least capable person in the family without ever asking what you had actually built for yourself. I didn't tell her everything was fine. It wasn't. I told her we could work on it. That was enough. My first stewardship meeting happened 2 months after Grandpa's death. I expected to feel like an imposter. Instead, I arrived with a notebook and 6 pages of questions. The independent board hired a new chief executive named Marcus Reed, who had spent 18 years managing regional supply companies. At our first meeting, I told him something immediately. I don't know how to run this company. He smiled. Good, I frowned. He explained that the most dangerous board members were usually the ones who believed they did. I liked him after that. We rejected the North Line sale permanently, not because Grandpa had loved the warehouse, because the numbers supported keeping it. We invested in repairs. We gave the warehouse employees clearer job protections, and we expanded the Anderson Skills Foundation into the unused section of the property. That became the part I cared about most. On the first evening of the expanded program, I stood inside Building C, while 28 students filled the classrooms. Some were 18, some were 40. One woman was 56 and learning bookkeeping after spending most of her adult life raising children. A 23-year-old man told me he had left college after one semester and had spent 3 years believing that meant he had ruined his future. I didn't give him a speech. I just told him there were more ways forward than people like to admit. Grandpa would have understood. 6 months after his death, Daniel finally completed the estate administration. My protected shares remained inside the stewardship structure. They did not suddenly make me a multimillionaire. I still went to my regular job. I still lived in the same apartment. For another year, I still drove the Honda. That confused Natalie more than anything. One Sunday, during our first family dinner in months, she asked why I hadn't bought a new car. I looked at her. Mine still works. For a second, nobody knew whether I was joking. Then Mom laughed. I did too. Even Natalie smiled. Richard wasn't there. He had stopped attending family dinners for a while. Nearly a year passed before we spoke properly again. He came to the warehouse during an anniversary event for the training foundation. I saw him standing near Grandpa's old office. He looked older, not defeated, just quieter. He told me the place looked good. I thanked him. Then he asked whether I thought Grandpa had hated him at the end. That question surprised me. No. How can you know? Because he gave you a way to keep what he wanted you to have. Richard looked toward the warehouse floor, and I threw it away. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. After a while, he asked whether I hated him. No, I had been angry, deeply. But anger and hatred weren't the same thing. I told him what I had eventually learned. Grandpa hadn't punished us for being imperfect. He had simply attached consequences to choices involving things other people depended on. Richard nodded. Then he left. We didn't hug. We didn't suddenly become close. Real families don't always end their worst chapters with everyone crying in the same room. Sometimes healing looks much less impressive. A birthday text, coffee every few months, a conversation that doesn't become an argument, a boundary that no longer needs explaining. 2 years later, I finally bought a small house, nothing extravagant. 2 bedrooms, a tiny backyard, a kitchen with 2 little counter space. I loved it immediately. Mom helped me unpack. While we were opening boxes, she found Grandpa's yellow envelope. I had kept it. The paper inside was worn along the folds. Call before they sell everything. Mom read it. Then she looked at me. For a long time, neither of us said anything. Finally, she asked whether I ever wished Grandpa had simply left me money like everyone else. I thought about it. Once, I probably would have said yes. Money would have been easier. But the phone number had forced me to do something money couldn't. It made me question the story my family had told about me. The dropout, the disappointment, the one who needed help. I had believed that story longer than I wanted to admit. Grandpa hadn't. That was the real inheritance. Not the warehouse, not the shares, not a seat on a board. It was the moment I stopped asking my family for permission to believe in my own judgment. I folded the note and returned it to the envelope. Then I put it in the drawer beside my father's old watch. Mom asked why I was keeping it. Because it reminds me of something. What? I smiled. Being underestimated isn't the same as being incapable. Sometimes people decide who you are because that version of you makes their own choices easier. You don't have to spend your life proving them wrong. You only have to stop letting them decide for you. Thank you for staying with me until the end of my story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe because I share a brand new family story here every single day. And if you're not ready to leave yet, open the next story on your screen. I have a feeling it will stay with you just as long.